Okay, so as we were mentioning in the previous video, whenever you plug in a negative y cubed, or negative y to the third power, you still get a negative, but this time y cubed, so that's where this negative is coming from. Y cubed times x plus 10 is equal to 0. It does not give you the original equation, so this one has no symmetry about the x-axis. This time we're going to plug in the appropriate coordinates for symmetry about the origin, and that's going to be negative x, negative y. So here we go. I plug in negative x. It was originally an x, but I have to plug in a negative x. Then it was originally a y, so I'll have to plug in a negative y, which you see here, negative y to the third power. Now, a negative y to the third power is going to give you a negative y cubed. But that negative y cubed times that negative x, and negative times a negative, is going to give you a positive xy cubed plus 10 is equal to 0. If you look at your original equation, that is identical to it, and so therefore this equation does have symmetry about the origin. So it really is just about you plugging in and remembering those points. Alright, moving on, the standard form of an equation. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. Please make sure you write that down. I'm not sure how Mr. Marks does it, but for my regular students, I give them the equation. For my pre-AP students, they have to memorize this equation. But again, write it down, and then you can discuss it later on with him. This is the standard form of a circle, Okay, and as you can see, we're always going to just usually stay in quadrant 1. R in this situation does still represent the radius, but I want you to notice one thing though. In the equation, it's r squared. So you're going to have to do something to get r, just r, and that would be to take the square root. So I want you to remember that. And then of course that middle part is called the center, and that's represented by hk. Notice that it's hk. In the equation it has a negative or a minus sign in front. So I always like to tell my students that minus basically is telling you to take the opposite of that. So the opposite of h and the opposite of k. That will be your center. Alright, so let's move on to this part right here. It says the point 3, 4 lies on a circle whose center is negative 1, 2. Find an equation of the circle. Find an equation of the circle. Okay, well the first thing we need to say is, let me go back to the word. I always like to start off with my equation or my formula, and that is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. And now I want to write down what's given to us. Well, the point 3, 4 was given to us, as well as the center, which I always like to abbreviate it as C, is given to us, and that's negative 1, 2. Okay, and so we need to identify and label everything. We know that this is a point or a regular coordinate, so we know that any coordinate has the letters x, y attached to them. And we know that the center has the letters h, k attached to them. So if you look at your formula, we have we have x, we have h, we have y, we have k. The only thing that we don't have is r, and that means we can definitely solve for it. So let's plug in everything that we know. We have x, which in this case is 3, minus h, which in this case is -1, and we're going to have to square it, plus y, which in this case is 4, minus k, which in this case is 2, square it, and that's going to give us r squared. All we do now is clean this up. 3 minus a -1 is a +4 squared, plus 4 minus 2 is a +2 squared, and that's equal to r squared. Okay. From there, we still clean it up because 4 squared is 16, plus 2 squared is 4, and that still gives us r squared. And 16 plus 4 is 20, is equal to r squared. And if we notice, that's exactly what we want to plug in. R squared is what we want to plug into the equation. So if we plug everything, leave everything in terms of x and y, everything in terms of x and y, so we're going to need to sub in h and k. So if we leave everything, this is going to be, remember, when I tell you to plug in everything, when you plug in the h and the k, you got to think of it as the opposite. So the opposite of -1 is going to be a +1 squared plus y. The opposite of a +2 is a -2, so or a -2 squared is equal to, and whatever we got for r squared way down below, which was 20. Okay, and that's our official answer. Now keep in mind that r squared is 20. That's not the radius though. The radius, in other words, just r, would be square root of 20. This is one of the instances, again, how do you get the radius? Just take the square root of this, so it'll be the square root of 20. But like I was saying, this is one of the instances where you don't do plus or minus with the square root because we can never have a negative radius. So that's why we just leave it as the square root of 20. But that is the equation of the circle. And I'm going to show you in the slide. We found the radius to be the square root of 20. But in the equation, it wants radius squared, so it's a 20. And so you have x plus 1 squared plus y minus 2 squared. Example 6. Complete the square to find a circle's center and radius. Alright, this one's a little bit more complicated. Let me write it down on my paper. Alright, so let's go ahead and complete the square. I'm pretty sure you've done complete the square in Algebra 2. This is actually something that I think I may need to. Let me copy and paste it onto Word. Alright, so what I'm going to do here that means I'm gonna have to type it. Okay. I'll just go ahead and quickly type the equation. 4x squared plus 4y squared plus 20x minus 16y plus 37 is equal to 0. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this number, the constant, to the other side. So it's going to be when I move it to the other side, it'll become a negative 37 right there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine not combine, but kind of cluster everything together. So in other words, I'm going to cluster everything that has an x together and everything that has a y together. So in other words, rearrange some things. So this is going to become 4x squared plus 20x, and then plus 4y squared minus 16y. And another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to divide everything by 4. So if I divide everything by 4, this is going to be just x squared. This is going to be 5. This is going to be just y squared. This is going to be 4. And this is going to be, this is going to be a negative 37/4. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and complete the square. I'm not sure how you were told to complete the square, but it's not going to highlight what I want. Alright, so let's see if I can color this one specific color. I'm going to complete the square for this one first, and then I'm going to complete the square for this one second. Alright, so I'm going to do x squared plus 5x. So I'm going to do it on the paint. X squared plus 5x. I'm going to take this right here, and I'm going to half it, in other words, divide by 2. I'm going to star that because I'm going to need that. Later on. And then I'm going to take that and square it. So I'm going to take the 5/2 and square it. So I square both top and bottom. So 5 squared is 25 and 2 squared is 4. That is what I add 25/4 to make it a trinomial. So it's going to be a plus 25/4. But you have to remember law of conservation of mass, like you've learned in chemistry. Whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. So I'm going to go ahead and add it as well. Now I'm going to do the y squared minus 4y. I'm going to do it in green. Y squared minus 4y. Keep in mind, I'm taking this one, this negative 4, and I'm halving it. Negative 4 because it has a minus in front. That's going to give me a negative 2. I'm going to star that because I'm going to need it later on. Then you're going to take that negative 2 and you're going to square it. Every time you square a negative, you get a positive, so that's going to give you a positive 4. If you're going to type this in the calculator, it needs to be in parentheses, and the squared needs to be